Hi everyone. Now we are going to discuss about host pathogen interactions. In those interactions also we are majorly dealing with virulence and host defenses or host defense mechanism. Okay, so let's see what is this host pathogen interactions. While a pathogen tries to enter, colonize and grow and multiply inside the host also counteracts toward the pathogens through the defense mechanism. And such type of the initial interactions are going to be called as host pathogen interactions. That means the pathogen tries to enter, colonize, grow and multiply inside the host, and the host also counteracts by the defense mechanism. And these interactions are going to be called as host pathogen interactions. And these whatever the outcome of the most uh, host parasite pathogen relationships is depend on three main factors. How many factors? Three main factors. The first one is the number of organisms present in or on the host. That means how many of them are going to attack is also going to be the one of the factor. Then the second one, virulence of the organism, and the third one is the host defenses or degree of resistance. So these are the two areas where we are going to discuss in detail in this part. One is the virulence of the organism and then host defenses. So let's begin the first one, virulence of the organism. Virulence. What do you mean by virulence? The degree or intensity of the pathogenicity of a pathogen is in causation of disease is going to be called as virulence. Virulence. What do we call it as? Virulence. The degree or intensity of pathogenicity, disease causing ability of a pathogen in causation of a disease is called as virulence. Pathogenicity means ability to cause a disease. Virulence means the degree or intensity of pathogenicity is going to be called as a virulence. And this virulence is often measured experimentally by determining the lethal dose, which we simply call as LD, or the infective dose 50, that is ID 50. So this virulence is going to be measured either as a lethal dose or the infective dose. And the virulence is going to be determined by majorly three characters of a pathogen. One is going to be the invasiveness, the second one is infectivity, the third one is pathogenic potential. Invasiveness, infectivity, pathogenic potential. What is meant by invasiveness? Invasiveness means the ability of the organism to spread to adjacent or other tissue. From the region where it is present, from there it have to spread. That is going to be called as invasiveness. Then what is meant by infectivity? It is the ability of the organism to establish a focal point of the infection. So that obviously is called as infection or infectivity. Then what is the pathogenic potential? It refers to the degree that the pathogen causes morbid symptoms. So it is going to show some sort of the symptoms. So that is going to be called as pathogenic potential. A major aspect of pathogenic potential is toxigenicity. So what is meant by toxigenicity? It is the ability of the organism to produce toxins is called as toxigenicity. And as I told you, this virulence, that is toxigenicity, can be often experimentally determined by the lethal dose LD50 or the infective dose ID50. Then what is meant by toxicity? Toxicity refers to the ability of a pathogen to cause disease by means of preformed toxin that inhibits host cell function or kills host cells is going to be called as toxicity. Okay, so the toxicity refers to the ability of a pathogen to cause disease by means of a preformed toxin that inhibits host cell function or kills host cell is called as toxicity. So this toxicity topic we have discussed in detail in another part under the heading called as bacterial toxins, there you can have this in detail. So here is a picture of a bacterial cell which is going to possess the virulence factors like exotoxins, and then you are going to have the toxin producing phase and then virulence plasmid. Okay, so this is the one which is able to produce these exotoxins, and these are the virulence factors that are surface proteins are going to act as like a adhesion villi, like fimbriates. Okay, then capsule, even the capsule is also then adheres virulent enzymes and lipopolysaccharides. So these are the things that are making an organism to be of virulent in its nature. So let's see all these things in detail one by one now. So coming to the virulence factors are those bacterial products that contribute to the virulence of the bacterial pathogens is going to be called as virulence factors. Examples, as I told you, the structural components examples are capsules and adhesions. So here you are going to have the capsules and some sort of adhesins. And then we are also going to have a bacterial products like toxins, extracellular proteins. So here are the toxins and some sort of extracellular proteins. So these are all going to be involved in causing the virulence factors to a organism. Let's see the first one, capsule. As we know, the capsule is a well-organized layer of material lying outside the bacterial cell wall is going to be called as capsule. So here you can see this is a microscopic figure. So this is uncapsulated bacteria where it do not possess any capsule, but these are all capsulated bacteria. Okay, so they are usually composed of polysaccharide and help bacteria resist phagocytosis. So they do not allow, that means this capsule will protect the bacteria from the phagocytic mechanisms of our cells. The best example of capsulated bacteria is Streptococcus pneumonia. And this capsulated bacteria are going to have the very uh, pathogenic effect, and it can quickly kills its host. For example, in Salmonella, the capsular VI polysaccharide inhibits complement binding and antibody mediated killing is going to occur. That means complement is a bactericidal and lyticidal agent for many that is negative bacteria when used in conjunction with the antibodies. However, the gram-positive bacteria are not killed by complement, okay, even in the presence of specific antibodies. So here you can see this is a capsulated bacteria. So when this bacteria enters into the host, the antibody is going to recognize and it is going to be what we call presented to the phagocytic cell in general. But if it is not going to be of a thing, that means this is going to be more pathogenic. It is going to release some sort of enzymes called as protease, which is going to involve in the cleavage of this globulin, that is our immunoglobulin, and that's how the phagocytosis is going to be skipped off. So if this is going to be having this capsule, any bacteria, then it is going to be pathogenic by this mechanism. Okay. Then second one is going to be of adhesins. So adhes or adherence factors or specialized molecules or structures on pathogenic cell surface that bind to complementary receptors on the host cell. So here you can see small dot like, okay, these are called as adhesins. So, or specialized molecules or structures on pathogen cell surface that bind to complementary receptor sites on the host cell surface. And some of the major adhesions and the concerned pathogens and their functions are given in this tabular form. You can see here is a fimbriae. Okay, the pathogen that possesses the Salmonella species, and this fimbriae facilitate binding to epithelial cells of small intestine. And even the pathogenic E. coli also possess the fimbriae, which are involved, which will help this E. coli to colonize the factor antigens of fimbriae binding to epithelial cells of a small intestine. Then second type of adherence proteins are Streptococcus pyogenes, where M protein present on the pathogen surface binds to the receptor on respiratory mucus. So actually these are all going to have a mucous membrane which will not allow the pathogens to bind. But the pathogens are also intelligent that they possess a special machineries which can avoid our defense mechanism. Then coming to the lipolytic acid present in the pathogen called as Streptococcus pyogenes, and this lipolytic acid helps this one in facilitates binding to the respiratory mucosal receptor, and even some S layer of some bacteria are going to be of a structural layer of cell envelope may promote adherence to the host cell surfaces. So these are all the adherence factors or adhesions which will allow the pathogens to overcome the defense mechanisms of the host body. Then moving to the third type is toxins. A toxin is a specific substance, often metabolic product of the organism that damages the host. So we had two types of the toxins, exotoxins and endotoxins. So this topic you can go in detail in another part called as bacterial toxins, where we have discussed in detail about it. Okay, then these are the differences between the exotoxins and endotoxins. The exotoxins are obviously proteins, they are heat labile, do not produce fever in the host, and highly toxic when compared to the endotoxins, and highly immunogenic, and they are specific cytotoxic, neurotoxics, and enterotoxics. That means they are able to damage the cells, then you are able to damage the nervous tissue and even the intestine also. And the examples of exotoxins are botulism, tetanus, and diphtheria. Then coming to the endotoxins, these are all going to be made up of lipopolysaccharides, that is lipids plus proteins. They are heat stable. They cause the fever, diarrhea, and vomiting, and weakly toxic and rarely fatal. And they are not going to have any toxoid potential and relatively weakly immunogenic. And they are going to have the mode of action in general body. Okay, and majorly disease causing examples are going to be gram negative infections and meningococcemia. So this is a exotoxin, and this is going to be the endotoxin, that is a lipopolysaccharide. So where you had of this is the lipid A, which is mainly involved in the antigenic nature, and this is going to be the core polysaccharide and the orthopolysaccharide structure. Okay, so this is the third type of the virulence factor. Then coming to the extracellular proteins, this is the fourth type of what we call it as a virulence factor. And pathogens produce certain extracellular proteins that aid in their virulence. So most of such extracellular proteins are enzymes. For example, hyaluronase, then streptokinase, then coagulase, then proteinase, porins, leucocidins, etc. Okay, so here we are going to discuss about one of the enzyme called as hyaluronase. Okay, what it is doing? This is basically produced by certain streptococci and streptococci A, B, C, G, and even some staphylococcus and clostridia are also involved in releasing this enzyme called as hyaluronase. Now, what is the mechanism of action? So, this streptococci, with the release of this hyaluronase enzyme, break down the hyaluronic acid. This hyaluronic acid is a kind of polysaccharide constituent of the intercellular ground substance that functions as a intercellular cement. So here you can see one cell and here one cell, where it is going to act as a cement between these two cells. That's why this is called as intercellular cement. Now what this enzyme is doing? Now this hyaluronase enzyme is going to break down the hyaluronic acid and enables the pathogen to spread from infection site to other. So here you can see the cement was broke down. So obviously these bacteria will try to enter into the other sides of the cell or the body. So in the same manner, the other enzymes are also going to have the different functions. Okay, so this is all about the extracellular proteins. Then coming to the another topic called as attenuation, which is very important. Okay, so attenuation refers to the degree or loss of virulence in a pathogen is called as attenuation. For example, when a pathogen are kept in laboratory culture and not passed through animals for longer periods, that means in the culture media, their virulence often decreases or even completely lost. Such phenomena is called as attenuation, and the organism is said to be attenuated. That means the weakened condition of a pathogen is called as attenuation. The process of weakening the virulence or weakening the organism, pathogenic organism, is called as attenuation. Attenuation occurs when cultural conditions are not optimal for the species. Suppose if an attenuated culture is re-inoculated into an animal, and virulent organisms are sometimes re-isolated. So there are certain examples of all these things. Here we don't require all those things. Attenuated strains are mainly used in the production of vaccines, especially viral vaccines such as measles and mumps vaccines are composed of attenuated viruses. But despite the disadvantages, that means advantages, we are also having some disadvantages. That means these attenuated vaccines may provide some sort of negative impact also. How means the pathogens used in attenuated vaccines are not different. The remote possibility exists that these attenuated pathogens in the vaccine may revert to a virulent form. That means they can get back to their virulent form and cause the disease. So for this reason, people with compromised immune system, such as the patients with cancer or infected AIDS, usually not given these type of vaccines. The reason is where the immune system is very low, these can become a strong and cause the diseases. That's why for the immunocompromised persons, these attenuated vaccines were not prescribed. Okay, so these all about the virulence factors and the attenuations where we have seen the host parasite interactions. So until now we had seen the virulence factors like capsule. So what is a virulence? Then we had seen the capsule, that adhesions, toxins, and the extracellular proteins. So these are the four factors which are involved in having the ability of a pathogen to have the virulence nature. And now we had seen the attenuation also. Now let's move to the host defenses. So what is meant by host defense? Defense mechanisms are overridden by the virulent pathogen, and in majority of the cases, the defense of the host is formidable to the pathogen. So that means in the immunology subject, we had gone through the certain type of the barriers, isn't it? So in the innate immunity, we had discussed the mechanism of innate immunity. You can go there where we have the in detail description of this all barriers. Okay, so here we are just giving a brief note of it. So as I told you, for a pathogen to infect and cause a disease is not a smooth process as we are discussing. So what a pathogen should do? The pathogen confronts a vast area of general and non-specific host immune defense mechanisms. And these defense mechanisms are overridden by the virulent pathogen, and in majority of the cases the defense of the host is formidable to pathogen. That means the host defense mechanism will win. Okay, but this ability is often referred to as resistance. That's what we are calling it as immunity. Defense mechanism put forward by the host may be non-specific or specific. So that means we may have the innate immunity or the acquired immunity. So specific, non-specific. Non-specific defense mechanisms develop post-infectiously and are specific for that particular pathogen. Okay, so here the non-specific or general defense mechanisms are grouped into four major categories. Number one is the general barrier, number two physical barrier, biological barrier, chemical barrier. So let's move to the first one, general barrier. Many direct factors such as nutrition, physiology, fever, age, genotype, race, and indirect factors influence all host parasite interactions. Okay, and for example, check the nutrition. The malnourished hosts are more susceptible to infections, obviously, isn't it? Next, fever. So we consider the fever induced by a parasitic organism augments, that means initiates the host defense by three complementary pathways. That means it stimulates the leukocytes so that they can destroy the organisms. Then it enhances the microbiostasis, that is growth inhibition, by decreasing iron available to the organism. Then it enhances the specific activity of the immune system. So this is how the fever is going to be a very useful in acting as a general barrier. Then coming to the age, so generally we know that very young and very old hosts are highly susceptible to infections. Then genetic factors of both pathogen as well as a host plays a crucial role in the pathogenesis. So these are all going to act as a general barriers in host defense mechanisms. Then coming to the physical barriers, which are also called as mechanical barriers. Okay, so this part we had a special separate video, okay, where you can go through them in detail about all these things. So the physical or mechanical barriers along with the host secretion, that is flushing mechanisms, are the first line defense against a parasitic organisms. So for example, you are going to have the skin and mucosa, very effective mechanical parasite, that is barriers to parasitic invasions. And then coming to our mucous membranes of the respiratory, digestive and urinogenital tract system functions as the effective barriers for the penetration of our microorganisms into the host. And even the eye, our eye is also going to have a specialized mucus secreting epithelial membrane. And not only that, it also possesses some sort of a lacrimal fluid, that is nothing but our tears excrete, that means exert a flushing action. And along with this, it also possesses an enzyme called as lysozyme, which is going to be a good antimicrobial substances. So that's how the total body is going to act as a, that means the skin, mucosal membranes and the eye, all these are going to act as a physical barriers or mechanical barriers in the removal or defenses against the parasitic organism. Then moving to the biological barriers, these are can be differentiated into normal indigenous flora, then inflammation and phagocytosis. Normal indigenous flora or normal microbiota of various organ functions as an effective barrier for colonization of foreign microorganisms in respective to the organs. That means the normal microbiota may inhibit pathogen colonization by different mechanisms. So we had gone through this normal flora in a topic called as normal microbiota or normal flora of human body, where you can go through it. Then coming to the inflammation, this inflammation is an important non-specific defense reaction to tissue injury, such as that caused by a pathogen or wound. And then coming to the phagocytosis, this also we had a separate video on this topic, phagocytosis, which involves the recognition, ingestion and destruction of the parasitic organisms. Okay, so and we know the phagocytic cells are monocytes, macrophages, tissue macrophages and neutrophils, which attach to the non-specifically to the organism targeted for phagocytosis. Then moving to the chemical barriers, so obviously mammalian hosts have a battery or variety of chemicals such as gastric juices, salivary, and then glycoproteins, lysozyme, hormones, fibronectin. Okay, then even we had the beta lysine and other polypeptides and interferons. So for example, take here our fibronectin. Okay, so it is a high molecular weight glycoprotein that can interact with certain bacteria. For example, it binds to a surface component of streptococci and aids in the non-specific clearance of the bacteria from the body. In the same manner, coming to the hormones, certain hormones affect the host defense. Example, our corticosteroids depresses the inflammatory response and immune system. Then even we know the beta lysine and some sort of interferons are a family related to the low molecular weight, and they are going to be of numerous in the eukaryotic cells which respond mainly to the viral infections. What are those cells called as? Interferons. Okay, so this is how we are going to have the different kinds of chemical barriers to protect the host against this parasitic organism. So these are all the host defense mechanisms where they are going to protect the host body against the pathogenic microorganisms. Okay, so general barriers, and then physical or mechanical barriers, then biological barriers, then we are having the chemical barriers. So you can see the figure here, enzymes in mucous tears and the saliva, chemical barriers, coughing and sneezing, that is the respiratory tract, the air filtration system of the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract effectively obstructs the pathogen's entry, isn't it? Then coming to our intestinal tract, the mucus lining and secretions of gastrointestinal tract make an effective barrier, and many parasitic organisms are killed in this gastric juice and in the, that means in the stomach. And the very high acidity of the gastric juice is about 2 to 3 is usually sufficient to destroy most organisms and their toxins. So that's how we are going to have a protective nature from the different kinds of organisms, though they are more in number. In the same manner, coming to the urinary tract, that is genitourinary tract, urine kills many bacteria due to its low pH and presence of urea and other metabolic products. And not only that, the flushing of urine through lower urinary tract eliminates the potential pathogens. So this is how we are going to have all these protective barriers to fight or to protect us from these parasitic organisms. So these are the two main concepts that we have discussed in this topic, that is the host parasite interactions or host pathogen interactions. Related to the pathogen, we have discussed about the virulence and the attenuation, and then related to the host defenses, we have seen the different types of the barriers or the defense mechanisms in the present the host. Okay, so this is all about the host parasite interactions or host pathogen interactions. Thank you.